Are you sure you want to be defiling your ancestors' remains like that?
You make it sound so dirty. Besides,
If little Mikey Walsh and his buddies Mouth and Chunk would have had guns and stronger upper bodies, they probably would have done things like this. This is the spectacular Uncharted Drake's Fortune for the PlayStation 3. And this is basically the Goonies, only with a lot more bullets and a lot less sloth.
it's kind of a long story. Less talking, more shooting.
Uncharted is every bit as awesome as a Goonies comparison warrants. And in fact, it's fitting we compare the game to a movie, choose Indiana Jones if you prefer, because Uncharted is really one of the brightest and most outstanding releases at that intersection of film influences and gaming conventions. It just has the feel of a Hollywood blockbuster, but it never forgets it's a video game either. And the adrenaline-fueled gameplay itself actually contributes to the cinematic feeling created by Uncharted's incredible graphics and score. Indeed, almost everything you do in this game feels like work for a stunt double. The characters themselves are another reason Uncharted feels so cinematic. Well, certainly they hardly deviate from established character stereotypes, but from the way they animate to their generally superb voice acting, they do a far more convincing job of telling a story than most video game characters. It's obvious touches like these, and even smaller ones as well, which keep the game's cinematic atmosphere consistent and engaging. And if you think things like that aren't important, well, you obviously haven't played Uncharted Drake's Fortune.
Well?
Little present from Sir Francis.
Oh, so you found the coffin.
Uncharted tells the story of Nathan Drake, a professional adventurer and treasure hunter by trade, who's on the trail of a prize with as much historical importance as financial value. What's interesting about Drake, though, is that unlike his cash-blinded associate Sully, he never really seems to be chasing a payday as much as a good adventure. An intrepid spirit he seems to have inherited from his distant ancestor, Sir Francis Drake. And the clues he's following on this particular hunt just so happen to have been left by Francis Drake himself. And although it's a few centuries old, the trail has gotten unexpectedly warm. And that is where Uncharted picks up the story. The blockbuster spirit keeps you engaged, but it's obviously the gameplay that keeps you playing. And that's where things get interesting for Uncharted. For all the things it does well, originality is certainly not one of them. A criticism which applies to both the Hollywood influences and even more so to the gameplay. After less than an hour with Uncharted, it's clear that Nathan Drake copied his homework from classmates like Lara Croft, that Persian prince, and even Marcus Phoenix. And Drake certainly doesn't try to hide it. A cynic could argue Uncharted is merely the result of 3 cups of Tomb Raider, 7 pinches of Prince of Persia, and a hearty dash of Gears of War. And even though that's a legitimate criticism, Uncharted is really the epitome of a game that's more than the sum of its parts. This is an action-adventure hybrid spliced with plenty of acrobatic platforming and third-person shooting. But unlike other games which try to be so ambitious in their unoriginality, Uncharted makes modifications and improvements to the mechanics it so liberally borrows. For example, the shimmying and platforming may feel very Tomb Raider, but Drake does it much smoother than Lara Croft ever has, which makes it a less frustrating endeavor in Uncharted. And while some of the acrobatics are obviously Prince of Persia inspired, the platforming passages are integrated into the game's environments a little more effectively in Uncharted. In the Prince of Persia games, for example, it's always clear where the prince needs to go, and in terms of design, it can sometimes feel a little contrived. But in Uncharted, you at least feel like your options are greater because the intended routes blend into the game world. You'll often look at rocks and vines and even try to climb these objects that you can't, Not because the routes are unclear, but because the layouts create what is at least an illusion that you can use your environment in creative ways.
Nate, you should be able to drop right down into the U-boat from there.
Much of Uncharted is obviously built around combat, specifically a cover and shoot mechanic, which feels somewhat Gears of War. This is the only area of the game which doesn't feel like an improvement over the games which inspired it, but that's not to say it's bad. In fact, quite the contrary, it's a lot of fun to gun down pirates and take cover behind ancient crumbling ruins, and it controls pretty well too. I have one minor complaint about Uncharted, and it actually comes with a disclaimer. Now, toward the end of the game, Uncharted throws you a wicked curve which forces you to change the way you've been playing. And I love that the game makes you drop the cover and shoot approach you'd been relying on for about 3/4 of the experience, and I won't spoil anything here, but it does so with an unexpected twist that, in terms of surprise, is just an awesome touch. Rather, my problem with this twist is that it feels completely separated from everything Uncharted had established from a narrative and atmospheric perspective. It's functionally awesome, but personally I just don't like the design choice behind it. But to be honest, that's an admittedly minor complaint against what is easily one of the most enjoyable and entertaining games on Sony's platform, and quite frankly, one of the most beautiful looking games of this generation. From the game's art style to its gorgeous lighting and effects, Uncharted is proof that sometimes graphics do matter, because they add a lot to the experience and often amplify the gameplay. If you're itching for some treasure hunting and ruin spelunking, I just can't recommend this game enough. It's derivative in just about every possible way, but Uncharted Drake's Fortune is way too engaging and way too much fun for that to matter.
Whoa, whoa, whoa,